I'm very interested in the Great Resignation, but I'm not the only one. So are my guests today, Sarah Firisen and Catherine Reynolds. They are the podcasters of the Impromptu Game Plan. Together, they also are writing a book telling the stories of people who have made career pivots in their lives. I'm bringing that story to you, that interview conversation in a few minutes. But today's episode is sponsored by podcastacademyonline.com, a virtual academy that graduates podcasters. 7 weeks long online group session, heavy on how-to instruction, information, and accountability. Graduate with your custom design functioning podcast. Podcastacademyonline.com, designed with the adult learner in mind. Schedule a free consultation. Podcastacademyonline.com. The next group session begins March 26, 2022.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Another episode, Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. Well, I kicked off this year with the mind, I want to know more about the Great Resignation. All right. I hear things that kind of disturb me. And I know that when we hear from those who have reinvented themselves, such as I did, or those who in the last 2 years actually are part of the Great Resignation, there's nothing more powerful than hearing their stories. But today, I have with me Sarah Firisen, and I'm looking down because I want to make sure that I don't butcher her name. Sarah Firisen. This is a very unique conversation because she is a part of the Impromptu Game Plan, which is a podcast, and it is a upcoming book. It's all about, and let me read this to you. It's all about exploring the career and life stories of people who've made pivots in their lives, sometimes through choice, sometimes as a reaction to opportunity or a challenge, or even both, to create more meaningful careers that utilize their strengths and experience and speak to their passions and values. So I think this encapsulates what we're talking about as far as exposing and bringing to you the Great Resignation. So with all of that, welcome, Sarah, welcome. And I must tell everybody that Catherine Reynolds is a part of this, the Impromptu Game Plan. She was not able to be with us today, but you'll meet her at a later date. So in the meantime, right here in the now, welcome, Sarah. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Margot. It's my absolute pleasure. This is really a topic I'm very interested in. So happy to talk about it.
Well, you are very well invested in this.
Yes.
I mean, you are knee deep, neck deep in this. So let's back it up a little bit.
Yeah.
How is it that you're in the software industry?
Yes.
How is it that you even think or thought about the Great Resignation or the reinvention of people, men, especially boomer women?
Yeah. Well, I've had many career pivots in my life, and starting about 10 or 11 years ago, I was working for PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I made one of my most meaningful pivots, the pivot that really changed my life in many ways. And I was actually working for Catherine. And Catherine was the global development leader at PwC, and she was redesigning and rebuilding this global leadership development program. And I worked for her, and I won't bore you with my entire life story, but essentially I worked for Catherine. I worked for Catherine for a while, one of the greatest career moves I had. And then things changed in the organization. I moved on, and Catherine and I became friends. And Catherine is in the UK. I'm originally from the UK, but I was living in the US for plus 30 years. And Catherine and I would have regular catch-ups. And she is particularly interested in second half of life careers, particularly for women, being a woman in the second half of her life. And I'm now working in the software space, and I've always sort of had a technical background. And I'm working for a company that does automation, robotic process automation in business processes. And so just as COVID was hitting, she and I started having conversations about what she was interested in, what I was interested in, and the intersections of these things. and thinking about my story and the pivots I had made. And we thought, I think there's something interesting here. Why don't we start doing some work on this?
Yes.
So, we were now deep into lockdown, and we started collecting these stories of people we knew or we had found who had made interesting career pivots towards a career that at the point they're in now feels like it's more meaningful and had better aligned their career experiences, strengths with their passions and their values. And after collecting a load of these stories and really investigating them, and Catherine is a leadership development expert and executive coach with 35 years experience, so she really brings the intellectual rigor to this. We started to pull out some themes and build a framework, which we call our storytelling wheel of reflection, with the idea that if people read these stories and then used this framework, they could start interrogating their own stories and careers and thinking about the pivots they might want to make. So this was all sort of, I guess, early to mid 2020. And what was interesting was, as we started talking to people about their stories, I wouldn't say this was the only kind of story we heard, but it's amazing how often the story was something along the lines of, I had a corporate career that was pretty successful, but that didn't really make me happy, didn't really feel that, it was what I really wanted to do with my life. And something happened. And that something was often somebody got laid off and got some kind of severance, so they had a bit of a cushion. Or somebody got very ill in a family and it was sort of a wake-up moment. There were various triggers for people to have that epiphany of, I need to make a change. And they then made that change and were now in careers that really fulfilled them more. And so we started doing the book, collecting these stories, and then we started doing the podcast, the Impromptu Game Plan, and hearing more and more of these stories. And it was funny because about midway through the number of episodes we have, we talked to this wonderful woman, Alyssa. I'm going to say her name wrong now. Let's just say Alyssa, because I'm not good with last names either. Absolutely wonderful. And she was someone who had, like so many people, was working remotely during lockdown, had been a real type A personality, very driven her whole life, was in the finance space. And when lockdown hit, something she realized is how much she had been neglecting her health, her, physical fitness, her family. She had young children. She'd get home at night and she was too exhausted to even play with them. And COVID lockdown gave her this pause, this space, where suddenly she and her husband were taking long walks in the middle of the day. She was spending time with her children. She was eating better. Mm-hmm. And when her company started saying, there was that point, I guess, when vaccines were first coming in, where companies were like, oh, we're all going to come back to the office. She's like, I don't think so. And she quit. And she found a job working for a small company where she was able to do it remotely and better align her work-life balance. And she was probably the last person we interviewed before I saw the hashtag Great Resignation. And I realized we had, without realizing it, been talking to people who were doing something that suddenly had a hashtag name to it. Yes. And so we then started thinking a little bit more mindfully about, is there actually a trend here?
Mm-hmm. And there really is. I mean, I'm listening to the groundwork and the dedication, commitment to flesh out these stories and let people have their say and actually find that common thread. Yeah. Because as I look back on the people that I've spoken with also, there was something happened, a layoff, got sick, COVID hit. Everybody had to go home. And then the light bulb went on in their heads and in their lives, in their spirits, that there's more to life than what I'm doing.
Yes.
Sarah, now that people are going back to the office slowly, even though the media, and I don't know how many people are actually having to go back and do that. The media comes in, it's a big deal. It's a big story. And we have numbers and stats and everything is on the front page, and then it dies back down. But I'm sure we're going to hear some more things before the time is over. But do you think that corporate America has to change with this data that you and Catherine have gathered together, these stories. Corporate America has to listen to the people now, where we did it this way, and this is the way we've always done business. This is the way we've always had our culture run and our ecosystem. Now they really have to pay attention to what's going on and what people are saying. What say you to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time to be in corporate life, whether it's corporate America or somewhere else. I mean, there was a time, when my father was a young man starting out in business, there were an awful lot of people who got a job and stayed in that job for life until they retired one day with a gold watch. Those days are long gone for everyone. So we've been a more mobile workforce for a long time. People have more choices, feel they have more choices. I work for a software startup, and as is infamous in that space, those kinds of companies, tech startups, they used to give free food, free snacks. There were games in the office. I mean, my company wasn't the only one. It was a very common way. It was what these young developers almost expected, that they'd come in and get breakfast and lunch and all these things. I think those kinds of benefits were very enticing to people, but you have to be in the office to have those kinds of benefits. Once we weren't in the office, then suddenly you were judging a company and a culture just on your day-to-day experience of working with your colleagues and what that company means to you, without some of the distraction of some of that other stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think a few interesting things have come up. I mean, I think first of all, and I think this is probably a change that we're not going back from, is people have started to realize, I don't need to, just because my company is based in New York, I don't need to live in New York. If we're all going to be remote anyway, why am I paying New York rents? And it's interesting. I mean, I say I used to work for PwC, which has some very interesting ideas and thoughts about the workforce of the future. One of the things they announced recently in the US is that it used to be the case that if you got hired by a PwC office in New York, the expectation was you were a New York employee unless you could persuade someone to let you change. They now said you can work from anywhere. Anybody can work from anywhere. Now, there may be some adjustments. We were paying you the New York rate. We're not going to guarantee you'll keep the same salary, but you can work from anywhere and keep your job. And I think that is a pretty far-sighted thing for a company to do. And I think there will be more and more companies like that. So I think, first of all, people are just starting to think differently about, all right, if I'm not getting the free food and if I'm working from home anyway, and as we know, we're all working more than we used to, what do I want from my job? Mm-hmm. So I think, first of all, there's just that idea of people being probably physically more mobile in terms of where they can be and still keep their job. But then I think the other thing that's interesting is that there has been a trend over the last few years to corporations wanting to have a stated purpose and stated mm-hmm. values, and look, that's certainly a good thing, but I do wonder whether for the average employee those values and purpose didn't feel just like it was the new brand statement and logo and color. I think what COVID gave everybody was, it was one of these unique experiences that don't happen in most people's lifetime, where the entire world got a chance, or almost everyone in the world got a chance, to have this pause mm-hmm. and this quiet time for reflection, where they had time, they were home, a lot of people were by themselves, and they had time to think, okay, what is actually meaningful to me? What are my values? Forget the company's values. What are my values? What's my purpose? What do I want? And then to look around at the companies they're working for and say, these values don't align with my values. Mm-hmm. This isn't my purpose. It's not that it's a bad company. It's just, this is not what I want to be doing with my life. So I think that how companies react to this will be interesting. And at some point, if you're selling a widget, you're selling a widget, and you can't start selling something different just because it'll attract more employees. I mean, that's not the way capitalism works. But I do think, just as companies are starting to be more flexible about where you can work, it'll be interesting to see if they become more flexible in order to provide employees the kind of meaning and purpose they're looking for, because otherwise they'll up and leave. I'm not quite sure what that would look like, but I think on some level, companies are going to have to change and adapt a little bit to this.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I totally agree. They're going to have to, and the word that you used a couple of times is pivot. Everybody's in a pivotal state of being, and nothing's really in cement the way it used to be.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I've spoken with, the commute, I'm in Southern California, and the commute, but even people back east, from New York to Jersey, the commute, they don't want to do that anymore. The time away from family. You are so right. One woman that I spoke with, she said that she had traveled so much until by the time she got home, she actually, before COVID, she was laid off, got home, had to hunker down. She found out her marriage was in a complete shambles.
Yeah.
And to this day, she's divorced, had no clue, no idea what was going on in her own home. She was gone that much, taking care of territories and serving the company. So we hear so many stories like that. I'm looking at the time, Catherine and Sarah, and you are a wealth of information. Definitely want you and Catherine, excuse me, to come back so that we can take a deeper dive look into the impromptu game plan.
We'd love to.
We are unpeeling an onion. I think we are looking at a story that is evolving before our very eyes. And the people, the employees, are writing the book. They are writing the story. They are creating the cultures. But I just have one final question. For a person that actually listens to the impromptu game plan, when the book comes out, they read it, they are inspired. What can they do right now so that when it's time to pivot, and everybody should be ready, you never know when that aha moment is going to come. Maybe it's inside of you and it's been trying to push up and speak, but we've been tamping it down. What should a person do right now so that they are prepared to meet that pivotal moment, that time for reinvention? They are going to be able to give themselves permission to become a part of the Great Resignation.
I mean, I think on a very practical level, we all need financial security and stability. So if you even think that you might be making that kind of major pivot, and not just to a different job, trying to make sure that your finances are in order and give yourself a bit of a buffer. How many months could you pay your rent for if you had to? Because it's very hard to make those kinds of big life and career pivots if you don't have any savings and you've got debt. So I think that's a very practical thing. Almost everybody we've spoken to has either had to scale back their lifestyle, or has had a very supportive spouse, or has got laid off, and there's some reason why they're able to do this. So that's the first thing. And I'd say the second thing is, the thing that we talk about, and I've mentioned here, is how do you align your strengths, your experiences, your passions with your values? I think you first need to be able to articulate what your strengths, experiences, passions, and values are. And I think people get very much in the mindset of, well, I'm an accountant, so that's my strength. I'm like, no, that's your job. Mm-hmm. Your strength might be that you have a great attention to detail, you're good with numbers, you like to help people get more financially skilled. Those are the strengths. The strength isn't your job. Your experiences, to some extent, are your job, but it's also more granular than that. What are the things you actually did? Not the role you had, not the title, the things. And then what do you love doing? What does bring you joy? What really brings you joy? And then what do you care about? Your values. What really matters to you? What would meaningful look like to you? Because you can't possibly start to think about how to align those things if you don't even know exactly what they are and can't say them out loud. So I think if you did those two things, you'd be in a good place for when you're ready to pivot.
Sounds like sound, sage, and tried and tested and true information. I know those things I had to take into consideration when I quit corporate after 26 years, or, you don't just do that. Things happen, and yes, you have to have a plan. But I have Sarah Firisen, Firisen, the Impromptu Game Plan. Oh my goodness. And aren't we living with impromptu situations coming all
Yes.
around us? But Sarah has given us so many nuggets, and you're speaking from experience. You gave us information concerning what you've heard and learned from those who have been there, done that, doing it. So I so appreciate you coming and look forward to you coming back again. All right.
I can't wait. Thank you so much, Margot. It's been an absolute joy.
Well, always. It's so hard for me to close out these episodes, and I am so invested and interested in hearing the stories of those who are part of the great resignation or those who have reinvented themselves. So
yes.
If you have a story, reach out to me, email me, just let me know. And perhaps you can come on Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. And I can't speak for the Impromptu Game Plan, but perhaps
we'd love to have people as well. Absolutely. We're always looking for new stories. Wonderful.
Let's put it on out there. Where you can reach, how you can get in front, and how you can reach the Impromptu Game Plan. I will have all of that information in the show notes. But Sarah, before we sign off, do you want to give a website so that people can scurry on over there and take care of that?
Absolutely. It's www.theimpromptugameplan.com, and on there you can listen to episodes, you can read some excerpts from the book, but you can also suggest yourself or someone else as a guest. You can do that from the website as well.
That's what I'm talking about. The Impromptu Game Plan has everything that you need, and it will guide you. We need guidance during these days. So I'm Margot Levette, and wow, I hate to close this out because I have another question on my tongue, but I can't get it out. I'm going to hold it over in respect for Sarah, but come back next week. Once a month, we have these conversations with someone who has reinvented themselves. They are a part of the Great Resignation, or a professional such as Sarah and Catherine. They are deep in the trenches of research, and they do what I do. They actually have conversations with people who can spill the tea, as they say. So I'll be back next week with another episode right here. Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. Bye-bye now.
Bye. Thank you.
Welcome to Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. This podcast was created for the boomer woman leaving corporate, and now you're looking to reinvent yourself, become an author, an entrepreneur, a podcaster. Well, each episode will leave you with clarity. You will come away with the yes, I can and yes, I will reinvent myself mindset. So come on, let's do this. I'm your host, Margot Levette.